We're going to take you straight to Beirut, where there has been at least one massive explosion in the last hour or so. We've got images just coming into us, and they show a scene of total chaos with debris littered across major highways. And this is indeed a live footage coming into us here at France 24, where you can still see plumes of smoke rising high into the air from the port area of Beirut. There are reports of extensive damage to buildings across an extremely wide radius. People a number of kilometers away are saying they felt that explosion. Cars have been turned upside down several hundred meters away on major highways. And as you can see there, thick plumes of smoke hanging above central Beirut, which can be seen far into the distance. Well, according to some reports, that blast occurred at Beirut's port, which is of course also home to a Navy base. We can't verify the exact location of the explosion, but according to witness reports on social media, as I said, that blast was felt several kilometers from the city center. It's not clear how many casualties there are, but there have been pictures of people covered in glass and blood fleeing from buildings. So I think it is an eventual certainty that there will be casualties from an explosion on that scale. Lebanon, of course, at this moment in the grip of massive political and economic uncertainty. We're zooming in a little bit there, and you can see what looks like the aftermath of a massive explosion in the port area. We don't know what was struck or by who, or indeed whether it was an accident. Many more questions than answers. All we can do is bring you witness reports and these live pictures from the center of the Lebanese capital. Well, there had been a warning from across the border in Israel only a few hours ago in response to an attempted infiltration attempt there by militants. And that warning was directed squarely at the Shia militant group Hezbollah. But there is no reason for us to connect those events to what has happened in Beirut at this moment. We have no word on that. But what we do know is that witnesses saying that the blast felt even stronger than that of the 2005 explosion, which killed the Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. That was, as I said, 15 years ago, not so very far from where this explosion happened in central Beirut, another explosion. And people saying on the ground, witnesses have told me that this explosion felt more powerful than the explosion of 2005. But of course, that depends very much on where they were geographically, and it's a fairly subjective feeling, the feeling of an explosion. But that is what some witnesses have said, is that it felt stronger than that particular explosion which killed the Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. There have been other theories put out there that it was an accident in some sort of a fireworks factory, but I think from people who've covered fireworks factory explosions before, and they do happen, that would not have caused, according to some, this degree of damage. Damage that is visible several kilometers away from where the blast happened. The windows of buildings blown out a number of kilometers away, and I think there was no one in Beirut that didn't feel that explosion. So clearly an absolutely enormous explosion. The health ministry in Lebanon now saying that there is a very high number of injuries and extensive damage. The health minister being interviewed by the Lebanese television channel LBC, giving that information that there is a high number of injuries and extensive damage from that explosion in Beirut. We did receive reports and we did receive word on social media as well that perhaps there was more than one explosion. We can't verify that. But what we can say is that the area around Beirut port and from far beyond there as well has been severely damaged by that blast. And some local TV stations, as I said, have been putting out that theory once again that there in the port there were fireworks being stored. But again, fireworks, I think in very few people's minds, would be capable of causing damage on this scale An extraordinary scene. For those of us who know Beirut well, this is an extremely shocking scene. It's very difficult to believe. This is the heart of a major capital, perhaps the most cosmopolitan capital in the Arab world. And as you can see, it is a scene of total chaos, debris everywhere, and clearly people in a great sense of shock at what has happened to their city, and at a time when the country is going through major economic and political upheaval. Again, I'm just receiving word from the health minister, Hamad Hassan, saying that a high number of injuries, extensive damage have been caused by that explosion, or indeed those explosions, if there was more than one, in the port area of central Beirut. These scenes basically telling the story for us. You can see soldiers running in all directions, the windows of cars blown out, the windows of buildings blown out, debris everywhere. We saw earlier cars that had been turned upside down a very good distance away from where the explosion happened. I would say even a matter of a kilometre or two away from where that explosion happened. Cars turned upside down. That gives you an idea of the magnitude of that blast, which shook Beirut just about an hour or so ago, causing, as you can see, absolute confusion and extremely extensive damage. We'll try to get you live reports from the scene, but as you can imagine, telephone connections, internet connections have been massively disrupted by what's happened there. So contacting our correspondents on the ground, no easy task. As you can see, plumes of smoke right up into the sky above the port of Beirut. There are ambulances obviously getting onto the scene. That ties in with what the health ministry is saying. Large numbers of people injured, as it's evident given something on that scale. We've seen people covered in blood, people emerging from the rubble of buildings where they were in, windows blown out of office blocks, apartment blocks, cars turned upside down. It's clear that this is something that has not been seen in the Lebanese capital for many decades, an enormous explosion that has caused damage in a very wide radius. We don't yet have any numbers for you with regard to how many people have been injured, but what is clear is that for a very wide area, there has been massive damage to buildings, massive damage to offices, and power is out for much of the city anyway. Even before this explosion, there were power cuts of about 20 hours a day or more in some parts of Beirut, meaning that connecting with the outside world is not altogether easy. And therefore we do not have, at this particular moment, anyone able to speak to us. But as you can see, the soldiers are on the ground trying to bring some order to the area and also trying to seal it off, because people were going freely to and from that area, and there is potentially the risk of a further blast given the scale of what has happened there. And of course the soldiers doing their best to make sense of an extremely complicated situation that they're in. That is the latest we have for you from Beirut. Large numbers of injuries, large numbers of casualties expected. No numbers for you yet. All we have are these shocking images from the heart of a thriving Middle Eastern capital, the city of Beirut, which has been turned to a scene of total chaos in the last hour by an explosion. Some say more than one explosion, which happened in the port area, which, for those of you who know the Lebanese capital, is very close to the center. And there you can see crowds standing in disbelief on the sides of the road in Beirut as emergency vehicles make their way to and from the scene of that explosion. And if indeed it caused damage to people a number of kilometers away and to buildings a number of kilometers away, one can only assume that the area affected in a very serious way by that explosion is going to be large, and the extent of the damage is going to be extraordinarily shocking. huge plumes of smoke going up into the air. That is the scene in Beirut at the moment, with soldiers on the ground, emergency services going to and fro as people try to make sense of what has happened to the Lebanese capital in the last hour or so. We first received reports just after 5 p.m. Paris time, just over an hour ago, that a huge explosion had shaken Beirut. We saw witness videos posted on social media showing the office, for example, of the Daily Star newspaper, which is not particularly near to where that explosion happened, and yet all their windows were blown in. France 24 has a team of correspondents in Lebanon. We're not able to reach any of them at the moment, but one has told me in a WhatsApp message that explosion was larger than the one in 2005, which killed the then Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri. And we also have heard from people on the ground that this is something that has not been seen since the time of the civil war, this degree of chaos, which comes at a time, in any case, when the country is in the grip of social, political and economic turmoil. We're trying to get hold of our correspondent on the ground, but her building was severely affected, as indeed many other people's buildings have been. On social media, she's reported scenes of people covered in glass emerging from her apartment block, windows blown in, and from what I can understand, not even particularly close to where that blast happened. But you can just see the scale of it there. The cars, that were parked within several kilometers of that, a number of kilometers, I should say, of that explosion have been very severely damaged. Let's cross to Beirut and we can speak to one of our correspondents there, Charbel Aboud, who joins us now. Charbel, just could you start by telling us where you are in relation to that explosion and what you felt?
Actually, I was around 10 kilometers from far from Beirut in the region of Ba'abda. Then we heard a big explosion. It's similar to the explosion that rocked Beirut in 2005 at the 14th of February when they assassinated the former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri. The explosion was huge, extremely huge, and we saw people going out from their buildings, checking their cars. It was a huge explosion. It was heard all over Beirut and far away from Beirut. I'm talking about some areas like Chouf, like Betten, and like Jouni. These areas far around 20 to 25 kilometers or more maybe from Beirut. They heard well the explosion. Many buildings, there's huge damage in many buildings surrounding the port of Beirut where the explosion happened around 6:10 Beirut local time. We have, till now, we don't have any clear number about the casualties, but the Red Cross is deployed in the area and they are working on taking the casualties to the hospitals all over the country and in the surrounding area of the explosion. I want to say also that the seaport is located in the eastern part of the Lebanese capital, and it's surrounded by many buildings, many urban areas where you can find hundreds of people working and maybe having some shopping, some coffee shops, and in some area around this explosion.
And Charbel, let's just go back to the scene of that explosion, because we're looking at scenes of it. We're looking at the scene now. I mean, what's significant about the port area? Is it a principally commercial port, or am I right in thinking that could also be some naval activity in that area? I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this, but do you happen to know what happens in that port area typically?
Actually, it's a big commercial port. It's the main commercial port of the country. In Lebanon, there's two big seaports, one in Beirut and one in Tripoli at the northern part of Lebanon. But in Beirut, this is the huge port, which is a commercial port. So normally, it's for commercial purpose, and it's only the only port in Beirut on the Mediterranean coast. Lebanon has two seaports, the major ones, one in Beirut and the other one in Tripoli. This one is in Beirut. It's located in the eastern part of the city. It's a big seaport known for transit work from Beirut to other Arab countries, and normally it's for commercial exportation and importation.
And Sharbel, just lastly, before I let you go, have you heard anything? Are you hearing any theories circulating, anything on local media, on social media, as to just why that area may have been targeted?
Till now, all what we know that it's due to fireworks, which is a big container containing a huge number of fireworks for normally used in Lebanon for parties or something similar. And there was a big fire on that container. So as a result of this, a big explosion happened. This is what many sources told us and mentioned on the local media. We are still waiting for more investigations in order to know what really happened there and who's responsible for this.
Okay, well, thank you so much for speaking to us. Sharbel Aboud, just outside Beirut.